Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Senior Fellow at the Media Research Center. I would say happy Monday to you, and maybe you are having a happy Monday, but I will tell you that based upon the most recent Supreme Court decision that was just laid down this early Monday morning, there may be some people that aren't very happy. And that Supreme Court decision has everything to do with the case of Masterpiece Bakery versus the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. Basically, it was the owner of Masterpiece Bakery, Jack Phillips, who refused to provide services to a same-sex couple that asked him to create a wedding cake for them. And what the Supreme Court decided 7-2 in his favor, Jack Phillips' favor, was that he did not have to, and he was constitutionally upheld by not having to provide that cake for that specific event. Now, the thing that is going to happen today and maybe for the rest of the week is that you will have the progressive socialist left and the liberal progressive media, which is their complicit ally, as probably the radical LGBT advocacy groups out there decrying that this is one of the most evil decisions, and this will end up returning us to a state of America where people were once told because you were black you could not have service. That's not the case. If you really read this decision, and again, the only two people that voted against this and dissenting were Sotomayor, Sonia Sotomayor, and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It was 7-2 people. I mean, Stephen Breyer and also Elena Kagan, those two justices, voted in favor of Jack Phillips. To say that he does have a constitutional right, that it surrounds his freedom of religion and his freedom of expression. Basically, what they said for Mr. Phillips is that you cannot force Mr. Phillips to participate or be a part of something that goes against his traditional religious beliefs. And in this case, Mr. Phillips believed in traditional marriage between one man and one woman. Now, this decision and Mr. Phillips' position was never that he would not serve anyone that was gay or lesbian, or he would not serve a same-sex couple. But what he was refusing to do was provide his artistic expression, which is also freedom of expression, and his abilities and his services toward a specific ceremony. And that was a same-sex wedding ceremony because his religious beliefs were not part of that. And that's what the Supreme Court supported today. So this is not, as the leftist media will probably come out and say, this is not about discrimination. This is about, if any discrimination, discrimination against Christians. Because Mr. Phillips brought his case before the Supreme Court, but there are several other cases that are out there that people have not heard about. For instance, Aaron and Melissa Klein of Oregon, who have lost their business, which was Sweet Cakes by Melissa, have been fined hundreds of thousands of dollars by the state of Oregon because they also said, look, we believe in traditional marriage, one man and one woman. We really don't want to provide our services for a same-sex wedding. And they were, by the state, told that they had to or face severe fines. Also, in the state of Washington, you had a florist, the exact same thing. She had been providing her floral services for gays and lesbians, but she did not want to do it to provide an arrangement for a same-sex wedding. And the same thing happened with a portrait studio owner down in Mexico. So this is a very important landmark decision because one of the things that the Supreme Court had previously done with the Obergefell versus Hodges case was to say that same-sex marriage was the law of the land. Now, I kind of take some umbrage with that because the Supreme Court is not supposed to make law, they're supposed to interpret law, which is what they did in this instance with this case between Masterpiece Bakery and the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. They looked at this and said, can we really violate one person's freedom of religious rights and also their freedom of expression right because of this thing called a wedding? And they decided that they could not. This does not mean that Mr. Phillips can refuse anyone because of their sexual orientation, and that, again, is not the case. So I think it is very important that we look at this case and understand where we're heading. We cannot have religious discrimination because we want to have cultural acquiescence. But also, I want you to understand that recently in New York City, we had a business establishment owner who was supported by the court there because he told a person wearing a Make America Great hat that they could not be served in his establishment. Now, to me, that's a violation of that person's freedom of expression, the freedom of their political expression. They weren't doing anything that was in violation of any of the code or the statutes or any of the rules or regulations upon which that establishment operated. It was just that that individual there did not like the fact that a Make America Great hat was being worn by a patron. Now, I think that that is a clear case of discrimination. But guess what? It was so interesting that the decision by that New York City court was celebrated by members of the left because this is all about suppressing any political opposition. But let's see what happens with the decision in this Masterpiece Bakery versus the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. Let's make sure that the media doesn't take this and spin it for their own purposes. That's a great reason why we have the Media Research Center, CNS News, and Newsbusters, because I'm quite sure that they will be keeping an eye on what the media does with this story about this Supreme Court case. The fact that it was 7-2, that means it was a landslide, and where we go from here. So stay tuned to CNS News, stay tuned to the Media Research Center, the great work they do. Stay tuned to Newsbusters, because it'll be interesting to see how the left tries to spin this decision this morning on the Masterpiece Bakery versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission case.